The market has a template for this. In January of 2025, DeepSeek's R1 matched frontier US systems at a reported fraction of the cost, and the reflex was immediate. If the intelligence is nearly free, the capital stacked behind it is stranded. Kimi K3 has been dropped into the same template, another DeepSeek moment, another referendum on whether the Silicon Valley has overbuilt. Now, that template is somewhat wrong, and the error is really extensive because it aims the hedge at the wrong layer of the stack. K3 is actually a convergence event, a 2.8 trillion parameter open weight model performing within reach of the latest OpenAI and Anthropic systems compresses the frontier gap from months to weeks and does it at comparable cost from a lab operating under constrained access to advanced silicon. Morgan Stanley rated as all-around catch-up across scale, performance, and price. Goldman framed China's arc as moving from DeepSeek era cost efficiency towards the ability to charge for frontier-grade output. Bernstein simply noted that China's leading labs can keep pace with US frontier. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel and welcome back to another episode of the Capital Insights series. In this video, we're going to focus on the AI stack and we're going to discuss with you the model layer economics. The main focus of the video is going to be the Kimi K3 and the convergence shock and why this isn't really the DeepSeek trade. What we're going to focus on is reading K3 through the stack, convergence attacking the margin and not the compute layer. And this brings us to starting with the misread out here. The market has a template for this. In January of 2025, DeepSeek's R1 matched frontier US systems at a reported fraction of the cost, and the reflex was immediate. If the intelligence is nearly free, the capital stacked behind it is stranded. Kimi K3 has been dropped into the same template, another DeepSeek moment, another referendum on whether the Silicon Valley has overbuilt. Now, that template is somewhat wrong, and the error is really extensive because it aims the hedge at the wrong layer of the stack. The tell is the unit economics out here. The DeepSeek narrative rested on the order of magnitude cost gap. K3 does not deliver one. On the Nomura's read of artificial analysis benchmarks, K3 runs roughly at 94 cents per task, essentially level with OpenAI's ChatGPT 5.6 and not a tenth of it. Whatever K3 is, it is not a price event. A model priced at parity with the incumbent does not collapse anyone's cost curve. It does something much more corrosive. So let's try and understand what K3 actually does. K3 is actually a convergence event, a 2.8 trillion parameter open weight model performing within reach of the latest OpenAI and Anthropic systems compresses the frontier gap from months to weeks and does it at comparable cost from a lab operating under constrained access to advanced silicon. Morgan Stanley rated as all-around catch-up across scale, performance, and price. Goldman framed China's arc as moving from DeepSeek era cost efficiency towards the ability to charge for frontier-grade output. Bernstein simply noted that China's leading labs can keep pace with US frontier. And now strip the house styling and 1 point sits underneath all the three. The differentiation that justified frontier pricing is thinning down. Now, this is worse for the model layer than a price war would be. A price war compresses the sticker, the franchise survives with the product stands distinctly better. Convergence compresses that distinction. When good enough at comparable cost, ships as open weights, the incumbent's pricing power erodes not because it was undercut, but because it was matched. The casualty is the moat out here, not the margin line, and the moats do not re-widen on the product cycle. So essentially, the convergence is a margin event wearing a benchmark headline. The threat isn't price, it's the collapse of the distance that justified that particular price. And this leads us to the stack decoupling. Now here is where the consensus reassurance misfires because the standard rebuttal to any efficiency stop is Jevons. Cheaper inference expands usage, so aggregate compute demand rises rather than falls. UBS makes the case cleanly. The mobile network analogy, each network generation cutting the cost per bit while total consumption surged. The life proof is Moonshot itself, still scrambling to bring the GPUs online after K3 demand overran its capacity. Efficiency is not deflationary for hardware. Now, this is all true and besides the point for the layer under threat out here. Map this onto the AI Stack Capital map that we have been discussing with you in various videos, and the two claims separate cleanly. Jevons defends the training compute and inference layers, more tasks, more silicon, more power, whatever the model that it runs. It offers nothing to the model provider margin. The reporting half concedes this in a single line that the near term pressure from K3 lands on providers' margins rather than compute demand and then moves on. That particular line is the whole story out here. Now, this particular figure shows you as to where the K3 shock lands on the stack. The K3 event actually decouples the stack. The bottom two layers get the Jevons cushion, the model tier gets the knife, and the top layers inherit what the model tier loses. Treating the shock as one undifferentiated AI trade is precisely the mistake that mispriced DeepSeek. And this brings us to where the value repos. Now, this is the distribution reset arriving on cue. If the model layer cannot hold frontier economics, the spend does not evaporate, it migrates. An industry that is left to a handful of frontier labs lets those labs hold high inference margins and expand into infrastructure and software. But heavier competition from the Chinese and other open weight models makes it harder for OpenAI and Anthropic to capture as large a share of AI spend. The residual repos towards the chip makers, cloud providers, data center operators, and the application layer. Because the Chinese open weight model still burns processors, memory, and electricity wherever it is deployed. Now, read this structurally. K3 is less a threat to today's winners than a reallocation of who captures the next dollar. Value does not leave the stack, it moves downward and out, towards compute and towards distribution and away from the model peer that has absorbed the headlines and the capital in equal measure. And this brings us to the compute and reserve overlay. Now, one trade reaches past the earnings margin frame into the multipolar one. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's recent assertion that US could soon hold 80% of the global computing power reframes compute as a strategic reserve, a national holding to be concentrated and defended, not merely a cost of goods. However, treat the figure itself with suspicion because it arrives without methodology or timetable and unsourced round numbers from principles that are positioning but not data as of now. But the framing is the signal out here. If the model differentiation converges towards zero, durable advantage shifts towards those who control the substrate, compute, power, and the fabrication chain beneath them. That is the seam wherein the AI question rejoins the reserve fragmentation and the sovereign AI threat. When intelligence itself commoditizes, the contest moves one layer down to the physical and the political control of the machines that produce it. And this is why we want to wrap up with the positioning view out here. The DeepSeek trade, shorting the compute complex on theory that cheap models tried infrastructure was wrong then and is wrong now. Jevons and the deployment footprint keep the compute layers big. The K3 trade is a different instrument altogether, shorting the model layer margin and long the layers that capture the displaced spend. Compute and power at the base, distribution and application at the top. Position for where the dollar is refilling and not where the press release is pointing to you. That's all that we wanted to share with you in this particular episode of Capital Insights that focuses on the AI stack and the model layer economics. We talked about the Kimi K3 and the convergence shock and why this is not exactly the DeepSeek trade. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned in for our next one.